And now welcome Ole Dahlberg, Vice President and General Manager, Cell Biology, to the stage.
Good morning. Very soon you will meet with Dr. Schiff from the Rady Children's Hospital and learn more about the CAR T-cell technology, the therapy, and how she's working with patients. Before we get there, I want to just highlight a few things, a few takeaways for you today. One is that the CAR T-cell therapy, which is really a revolution in cancer therapy, is an invention that was developed together with Thermo Fisher. It's one that started way back in time. And I'll say a few words about that. The other thing is that this is an amazing example of how we enable our customers with not only a product, but with manufacturing and being a partner and with excellent supply. We started this collaboration with Carl June, which is one of the key inventors of the CAR T-cell therapy back in 1998. And back then, he was working with HIV therapy. And as he started to look at cancer during the 90s, his question was, can you use the patient's own immune system in order to take care of the cancer cells? And as you know, your immune system is doing a pretty decent job in taking care of outside intruders like bacteria and virus. But your immune system is designed so as it recognizes your own cells and don't kill your own cells, including the cancer cells. So this is one of the key issues with cancer. In the CAR T-cell, this is the core of the CAR T-cell therapy. It actually upgrades your immune system. You put it back into the patient's body, and it actually is a curative therapy. I would say that it took us a long time. We started in '98. We worked back and forth with the technology, and we had many failures. 12 years later, actually probably 13 or 14 years later, he tried this on 3 patients, which is not very often mentioned. These were 3 elderly gentlemen, and the results were just stunning. I believe this was back in 2011, and we didn't hear much about that. And then he had this patient, the first children, which is Emily Whitehead. And she'd been going through a number of therapies, number of treatments, and with no success. Experiences a relapse again and again, and they were about to give up. They had no more options. And Carl June and the Children's Hospital back then, they asked the family if they were willing to try this. And it came with a high risk. And I think that you probably heard this story before, and you can read these stories. I'm not going to go through all the details, but it's a few very dramatic days. She wakes up from coma. They see 3 weeks later, she's in full remission, and 7 years later, actually 8 years later now probably, she's still cancer-free. Now, if this had gone wrong, I don't know if we would have a CAR T-cell therapy on the market today. So this is really the destiny. And Emily, she actually came out to one of our sites in Norway in order to meet with our scientists, our manufacturing people, and to see how they work with the therapy. The difference between Emily and the 3 gentlemen was that she posted it on Facebook. So, in a very few days, she had hundreds of thousands of likes, and the news about CAR T-cell were out in public. By that time, Novartis reached out to us and asked for a collaboration. So we started to work together with Novartis and with some of these clinical environments, and this was back in 2013. And it has taken us all this time in order to get the manufacturing up and going, see that the technology is working, put it in clinics, and in 2017, this product hit the market. And this is what we're going to hear more about today. So So this is really how it works. It's, you take the patient's immune cell kind of out of the patient. You use the Dyna beads with this, which is coupled with antibodies that we also manufacture. You then modify the immune cells, and you put in, it's a genetic modification. So you can use the CRISPR technology that we have. You use a viral vector in order to insert this gene into the T cells. And you can use one of our vectors for that too. And then you have to expand those cells. You have to make them grow. And you have to make them, many of them, right? And you have to activate. You have to do what you do in the immune system, in the body. You have to tell the T cells, you're ready to go in there and attack, and you have to multiply them. You put them back into the patient, and now we're usually saying that they have a license to kill. So that's what they're doing. They're going after the cancer cells, and it's very, very effective. So, and I think I had asked Dr. Schiff this morning. I heard once that in one of the first experiments we were doing, we were actually removing 7 pounds of cancer cells. I don't know if that's true, but it's an amazing number. Each T cell is actually killing 1,000 cancer cells. It's unheard of in cancer medicine. So as you can see that we enable this whole workflow with products out of Thermo Fisher. And therefore, we are, of course, very excited to hear how this actually works in practice and with patients. So it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Schiff. Please come on stage. She's a pediatrician and a hematologist at the Rady Hospital. She's got more than 30 years of experience, clinical experience, and been with Rady Hospital for since 1996.
I did 23 years at Rady's, and yes.
Please welcome Dr. Schiff.
Thank you.
Please. So before we start talking about the CAR T cell technology, maybe you should say a few words about your role at Rady's and the Rady Hospital.
So I'm a pediatric hematologist, oncologist. Primarily now I work with bone marrow transplant patients, and I've sort of piloted and pioneered CAR T cell therapy at Rady's. For all the reasons you mentioned, I really wanted to bring it to San Diego so we could provide it to our patients. And that Emily Whitehead picture I have in my talk, which I've given over and over again to train the Rady staff, but we also have a picture of one of our own Rady patients who's benefited from CAR T cells. So I hope to be able to bring your work and connect it to patients whose lives have been affected and basically saved through your technology.
Why don't you tell a story about one of your patients? I mean, they've heard about Emily before, and I think she would probably not qualify for a treatment like this today in the programs they have today.
She would at that point, well, she may have, but they probably would have waited till her, if possible, leukemia was better controlled before giving her the infusion.
Yeah.
That's one of the recommendations is do not give the infusion if the leukemia cells are actively increasing, and I've heard that was the case, that she had a large amount of leukemia, not only in her bone marrow, but in the peripheral blood as well. So to talk about what inspired me to bring CAR T cell to Rady's, we've treated over the years when the clinical trials were ongoing before it was approved by the FDA and there was a commercial product. We've treated and managed the patients prior to and after we had to send them off to other places to get the therapy. Most commonly, it was Children's Hospital Los Angeles and Seattle, and had some good responses. And what really brought it home, one of our patients, it was the picture of with me. That she's a CAR T patient. That's okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I treated her for her leukemia. Unfortunately,
there we go.
Yes, so that was one of my very special CAR T patients. So we treated her leukemia. It relapsed. She needed a bone marrow transplant. Received it from her brother, who was the donor, and then unfortunately 4 years after the transplant, which is late, the leukemia came back, but in this setting, it was mostly affecting her liver. One of her bones was affected and a little bit in her marrow. So since CAR T therapy was this up-and-coming thing and really offered her the best hope, we arranged for her to go to Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where there was an open study. They collected her cells, sent her back to us, where we gave her chemo just to kind of bridge her until the cells were manufactured and ready to be given back to her. Yeah. And then through 3+ years, she's fine and doing exceptionally well, has a lovely boyfriend. I'm hoping to be invited to the wedding. She's in college, exceptional student. Her math teacher encouraged her to take more math classes, and she wants to be a nurse someday. So with that interaction, that experience with her, I reached out to Novartis while these trials were ongoing, said, please, can we open it at Rady's? They said, no, it's been open and it's still a little too late to get you involved. But once it was FDA approved, they selected us as one of the additional sites to be certified to provide it, and then the rest. We've been able, so far, it's been more than a year since we've treated our first CAR T patient. We've treated 5 so far, and then 4 of those 5 relapsed after bone marrow transplant. And it's truly a game changer to be able to offer patients this therapy after transplant, because before we had CAR T cell therapy, the very best curative therapy we could offer was extremely intensive chemo, toxic chemo, followed by a very intensive toxic second bone marrow transplant, and that wasn't a happy conversation to have. And now when I describe this therapy to the patients, initially they hear that the patient's relapse, there's tears, me, them, mom, dad, patient, and then as I describe the plan, you notice the tears stop and they kind of lean in, and you see that glimmer of hope in their faces, and it just has been game changing. And all of the 5 that we've treated so far are doing well.
It's amazing.
Knock on wood.
It's and I've been going through some of this myself with somebody in my family, and traditional cancer treatments takes a long time. We were going through like a year and a half, and it didn't go so well. But this therapy has a pretty short time they're spending in hospital, right?
Right, and as I describe it, people will say, well, why don't you just treat everybody with CAR T cell therapy? But it's really right now for the small percentage of patients with, so we use it mostly for B cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's the common childhood leukemia, or B-ALL. And 98% of patients with children with B-ALL will go into remission. It responds well to standard therapy, and then 90% will stay in remission without it coming back. But there is that 10%, either they don't respond initially or it does recur, and those are the patients that could benefit from CAR T cell therapy. But I have had a parent say, she went through, speaking of her daughter, she went through 3 years of chemo and then more chemo. Why couldn't we just do this at the beginning? And this is a patient, she's now about 6 months post her CAR T cell therapy. Full hair, head of hair, which is very important to the patients. Yeah. Back at school full time. Her only medications are vitamin D, and she takes a probiotic for health. Whereas our post-transplant patients and our patients who are on chemo, they're on antibiotics, they're sometimes on magnesium supplements, blood pressure medicines, after transplant, often immunosuppression. So it's just the quality of life even after the procedure is very, very different.
Yeah, it's amazing. You mentioned that there were a few patients, but you and I, we had an interesting conversation about this. You said you've seen this up at Novartis. They have this wall of lights.
Oh, okay.
And so there's like in Novartis they have this, in the reception area they have this wall, and there's a little light for every patient they treat with the CAR T. And you said that when you've seen it, it was...
Well, I've never been. I would love to go someday, and I know you've seen it firsthand, but I would love to go. We had somebody come and speak. It was a investigators meeting last week in Dallas, and an adult man who had been treated for multiply relapsed B-cell lymphoma came and spoke. He was doing wonderfully, and he was treated on one of those early studies, but he got to visit the manufacturing facility in Novartis in New Jersey, and he said the two things that really struck him, one, how the lab technicians, people working there, were just so thrilled to meet him. Everybody hugged him and wanted to talk to him. They showed him this wall of light. So there's now like 1,000 lights, and I think they need a new wall because they didn't expect that it would be so many so quickly.
When I was there, so it's
right. So, and these people just so dedicated, and they're in their lab working with their cells, but they're saving lives. And then they had the opportunity to meet somebody who they had helped directly. I think it meant a lot to them. But the other thing, he didn't realize what the people in the lab were doing. You saw it in that slide. The cells, once they're genetically modified with the beads, they're selecting out the T cells. That the cells in culture expand. So they're taking his cells, but also increasing and making them multiply. And then one of the magical things about CAR T-cell therapy, once they're infused, unlike other medications, if you give a standard medication, it's gonna be broken down and excreted. No medicine lasts forever, whereas these CAR T, oops, did I do something? These CAR T-cells, not only they persist, but they expand. They can go to where they're needed. There's spinal fluid, if there's fluid around the lungs or the heart, penetrate bone. It's miraculous, and they can persist. With Emily Whitehead, it's been more than 7 years, and our patients, the young woman in that slide, it's been more than 3 years, and we know that her cells have persisted as well. So there's something magical about that kind of therapy.
You had a very cool description. You said it's like a living drug.
Exactly.
And it's, I never heard that before. I like that. What's a good patient? Who can get the treatment today?
So FDA, based on the clinical trials that have happened and the results, and they have been pretty remarkable results. One of the big multi-center studies, within 3 months, 83% of the patients had no evidence of disease. And for the patients that were eligible for that trial, these were patients with refractory disease that didn't respond to standard therapy, or their leukemia had come back multiple times, two or more times. That's an unheard of response. Like standard current therapy other than CAR T does not achieve that response. So that's quite remarkable. But based on those clinical trials, the FDA has clear guidelines so to be eligible to receive the commercial FDA approved product, and we use Kymriah, the Novartis product, for pediatric and young adult patients with B-cell ALL or acute lymphoblastic leukemia who are 25 years and younger, who have relapsed 2 or more times or have refractory disease. That's approved by FDA, and insurance should pay for it, which is a big thing. And then for adults with B-cell lymphoma, and adults we're assuming is an 18 and older, but it's very rigid from the FDA, who have refractory disease that doesn't respond to 2 or more lines of therapy or have recurred 2 or more times. But this investigator meeting that I went to last week, Novartis is actively looking to do clinical trials to test their CAR T cells in patients, other groups of patients that may benefit. So right now at Rady Children's, we're in the process of opening a study where patients with B-cell ALL, children with B-cell ALL who, after about 5 months of treatment, if they still have detectable leukemia, they would be eligible to receive CAR T-cell as part of a clinical trial to kind of expand other patients who may benefit. And we know those patients have a poor prognosis because of a delayed response to therapy. They're also looking in the adult population to treat them with adults with ALL, to treat them with Kymriah and see if there's a benefit. and then in pediatric patients with B-cell lymphoma to see if there's a benefit. So hopefully we'll get CAR T-cell therapy to everybody who could benefit from it.
Yeah, it's you've been spending a lot of your time in order to bring this to San Diego. How important do you think it is to have it local?
Oh my gosh, it makes a huge difference to the patients to be able to stay here. And clearly these patients, we have a very well-established relationship with them if they've already gone through the multiple years of therapy before they need to receive the CAR T-cell therapy. So they feel like we're extended family. They're very comfortable at Rady's. To have to send them to another state like Seattle or up the road to LA is not their first choice or our first choice. So it's been good. It's been good for everybody.
Dr. Schiff, thank you so much for taking the time to come here, share your story, tell about your work at the Rady's, and educate us on the CAR T.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much
For the work that you all are doing.
Thank you so much.